The ballroom was filled with laughter, crystal glasses, expensive suits, decorated uniforms, and the kind of powerful people who were used to being obeyed the moment they entered a room. It was an annual military charity gala, a night where senior officers, politicians, business leaders, and decorated veterans gathered beneath golden chandeliers to celebrate their achievements. Waiters moved between the tables carrying trays of wine and champagne, while a military orchestra played softly in the background. At the center of the room stood Admiral Richard Harlan, a powerful SEAL commander known for his sharp tongue, intimidating presence, and absolute confidence. He had spent decades building a reputation as a man who could silence an entire room with one look. That evening, surrounded by senior officers and wealthy guests, he was enjoying every second of the attention. He held a glass of wine in one hand and laughed loudly as a group of officers gathered around him. Then his eyes moved across the room and stopped on a woman standing alone near the edge of the ballroom. She was a black woman in her late 30s, calm and composed, wearing a perfectly pressed military uniform. Her posture was straight, her expression unreadable, and the rank insignia on her uniform clearly showed that she was a high-ranking officer. Unlike everyone else in the room, she was not laughing, drinking, or trying to impress anyone. She simply stood quietly, observing the room. Admiral Harlan narrowed his eyes. He had never seen her before. "Who is that?" he asked. One of the officers beside him shrugged. "I'm not sure, Admiral." Harlan smiled. "Then perhaps we should find out." He walked across the ballroom, with several officers following behind him. The woman noticed him approaching, but did not move. When he stopped in front of her, she looked directly into his eyes. "Admiral," she said respectfully. Harlan looked at her uniform, then slowly looked back at her face. "Lieutenant Commander," he said. His voice carried just enough sarcasm for the nearby officers to hear. "That's an interesting rank for someone who looks so young." The woman remained calm. "I'm 38, Admiral." Several officers chuckled. Harlan took a sip of his wine. 38? Impressive. I suppose they're promoting people quickly these days. More laughter followed. The woman did not react. Harlan looked around, enjoying the attention. "Tell me, Lieutenant Commander, are you actually in command of something? Or is that uniform just for decoration tonight?" The laughter grew louder. A few people nearby turned to watch. The woman's expression remained calm, but her eyes became colder. "I'm here as an invited guest, Admiral." "An invited guest?" Harlan repeated with a grin. Then perhaps someone made a mistake. One of the officers beside him laughed loudly. The woman looked at Harlan for a long second. "Perhaps." The answer was so calm that it made the laughter fade. Slightly, Harlan tilted his head. "You know, I've spent my entire career surrounded by people who earned their rank the hard way. Sometimes I see someone wearing a uniform and wonder how they got there." The room grew quieter. The woman said nothing. Harlan leaned closer. "No offense." "None taken," she replied. That answer irritated him. He expected anger. He expected embarrassment. Instead, she stood there like nothing he said mattered. Harlan looked at the small group of officers around him and smirked. "You know what? I have a joke." The woman raised one eyebrow. "Do you?" A woman walks into a military gala wearing a rank nobody recognizes. The officers around him laughed before he even finished. And the punchline is, Harlan looked directly at her. Apparently, they let anyone become an officer now. The laughter erupted around them. A few people covered their mouths. Others looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. The woman remained completely still. She did not lower her eyes. She did not defend herself. She simply looked at Admiral Harlan with an expression he could not understand. Finally, she said, "Are you finished?" The laughter stopped. Harlan's smile disappeared for half a second. "Excuse me?" "Your joke," she said. "Are you finished?" A strange silence spread through the ballroom. Harlan stepped closer. "You seem to have a problem with humor." "No," she replied. "I have a problem with people who confuse disrespect with humor." Several officers looked away. The Admiral's face began to tighten. "You should be careful." "I usually am." "Do you know who you're speaking to?" The woman looked at his uniform. "Yes, Admiral." Her voice was calm. "Do you know who you're speaking to?" The question caught him off guard. He looked at her insignia again. a lieutenant commander who apparently thinks she's above a joke. No, she said. A lieutenant commander who has spent enough time in dangerous places to know the difference between a joke and a warning. The ballroom became completely silent. Harlan stared at her. Then suddenly he laughed. Dangerous places? He said. You? The woman said nothing. Harlan looked at the others. Did everyone hear that? The officers forced a few uncomfortable laughs. He raised his glass and took another sip of wine. Well, this evening just became interesting. He turned slightly, and that was when the sleeve of the woman's uniform shifted. Only for a second, but the movement revealed a small portion of dark ink on her upper arm. Harlan's eyes landed on it. His expression changed. The tattoo was not large. It was partially hidden beneath her sleeve, but he recognized the symbol instantly. A skull beneath a crosshair. Beneath it, one word, sniper. Harlan stopped breathing for half a second. The glass in his hand remained frozen near his chest. He stared at the ink. The woman noticed. Her expression did not change. Something wrong, Admiral? She asked. Harlan did not answer. His eyes remained fixed on the tattoo. He had seen that symbol before. Years ago, in a place where names were rarely spoken and survival depended on trust. A classified operation in a remote war zone had gone terribly wrong. A small team had been trapped behind enemy lines after their extraction was compromised. The situation had become chaotic. Communications had failed. The team had been surrounded. Harlan had been a younger officer then, not yet an admiral, and he had been responsible for getting his people out. But someone had saved them. Someone they never saw clearly. Someone who had remained hidden for hours, eliminating threats from a distance and guiding the team toward safety. The mysterious sniper had saved 6 lives that night. Harlan had spent years trying to discover who that sniper was. The only clue had been a symbol painted on a piece of equipment left behind, a skull beneath a crosshair. The symbol had been connected to a legendary operative whose identity had never been publicly revealed. The official report had simply stated, unknown Allied marksmen provided critical support during emergency extraction. But Harlan knew the truth. That sniper had saved his life. He remembered one moment more clearly than anything else. He had been injured, trapped behind a concrete barrier, and unable to move. The situation had been collapsing around him. Then, from somewhere far away, a single precise shot had changed everything. A path had opened. His team had escaped. And before anyone could find the person who had helped them, the sniper had disappeared. Harlan had never seen the face. He had never learned the name. But he had never forgotten the tattoo. The woman watched him carefully. You recognize it, she said. The Admiral slowly lowered his glass. The room was still silent. Where did you get that? He asked. His voice had changed completely. The arrogance was gone. I've had it for years. That symbol. Yes. Harlan stared at her. Who are you? The woman looked around the ballroom at the people who had laughed at her moments earlier. Then she looked back at him. You just told me you already knew. Harlan shook his head. No, I didn't. You said I was a lieutenant commander. That's your rank. You asked who I was. The Admiral's face had gone pale. I'm asking again. The woman took one slow step toward him. My name is Maya Brooks. Harlan froze. The name hit him like a memory from another life. Maya Brooks. He had heard that name once. Years ago, it had been written in a classified report he was never supposed to see. A young operative. Exceptional precision. Unmatched field instincts. Officially listed as missing after a mission. The file had later been sealed. Harlan stared at her face. He remembered the voice from that night. Calm. Controlled. Almost impossible to hear through the radio. Move now. He had heard those words while trapped behind the barrier. He had never seen the person speaking. But now, standing in front of him, he heard that same calmness. Harlan's eyes widened. It was you. The woman said nothing. You were there. Still nothing. You saved my team. Maya looked at him. Your team survived. Harlan's hand began to tremble slightly. The officers around him looked confused. Admiral, one of them asked. Harlan ignored him. He was no longer looking at the woman's rank. He was looking at the person behind it. You were the sniper, he whispered. Maya's expression remained unreadable. I was part of the team. No, Harlan shook his head. You were the one. Maya did not answer. That silence was enough. The Admiral slowly placed his wine glass on a nearby table. The room seemed to shrink around him. Only minutes earlier, he had been mocking her rank in front of dozens of people. He had laughed at her. He had questioned whether she belonged in the uniform. He had turned her service into entertainment for a room full of people. And now he was realizing that the woman he had publicly humiliated was the same person who had once saved his life. Harlan looked around the ballroom. Every officer who had laughed was now staring at him. "You knew?" he asked Maya. "Knew what?" "That I was there. I knew who you were. And you said nothing?" Maya looked at him calmly. "You didn't ask." A few people lowered their heads. Harlan's face tightened with shame. "I owe you my life. You owe your team your respect." The word struck him harder than any insult could. "Have." The Admiral stood silently for several seconds. Then, in front of everyone in the ballroom, he removed his cap. He looked at Maya Brooks. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, his voice now clear enough for the entire room to hear. "I owe you an apology." Maya did not move. "For what?" Harlan swallowed. "For disrespecting your rank. For mocking your service. For turning your uniform into a joke." The ballroom was silent. "And for failing to recognize the kind of person standing in front of me." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "Apology accepted." Harlan nodded, but he was not finished. He turned toward the room. Everyone who laughed tonight should understand something. The guests stared at him. Rank is not always a measure of how much someone has suffered. A uniform does not tell you everything a person has survived. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the reason people like me are still alive. Nobody laughed now. Harlan looked back at Maya. "You saved 6 people that night." Maya shook her head. "The team saved itself." "No," Harlan said. "You gave us the chance." For the first time that evening, Maya's expression softened slightly. "Then use the chance well." The Admiral nodded. "I have tried." "Try harder." A few people in the room looked shocked. The woman who had been mocked minutes earlier was now speaking to one of the most powerful officers in the room as if they were equals. And the strange thing was, Harlan did not seem offended. He looked almost grateful. The story could have ended there, with an apology and a shocking revelation. But the following morning, something even more unexpected happened. A photograph from the gala began circulating online. Someone had captured the moment Harlan stood frozen after recognizing the tattoo. The image spread rapidly. People wanted to know who the woman was. News outlets began asking questions. Military officials refused to comment. But within days, the story had become impossible to hide. Maya Brooks had served in some of the most dangerous operations of her generation. She had earned every promotion. She had received awards that were never publicly announced. She had saved lives that most people would never know existed. And yet she had never told anyone about it. When a reporter finally asked why she had remained silent while the Admiral mocked her, Maya simply answered, "Because I don't need to explain my service to people who have already decided what they want to believe." That sentence became famous. But the moment that truly changed everything came weeks later when Admiral Harlan invited Maya to a formal ceremony. The entire military leadership was present. Harlan stood at the podium and called her name. Maya walked forward. The Admiral looked at her and said, "Years ago, I thought I knew what courage looked like. Then I met the person who saved my life and realized I had been looking in the wrong direction." He paused. "Lieutenant Commander Maya Brooks, your service was never defined by the tattoo on your arm, your rank on your shoulders, or the recognition you received. It was defined by what you did when nobody was watching." The room rose to its feet. Maya stood silently as the applause filled the hall. She did not smile widely. She did not seek attention. She simply stood there, calm as ever. But this time, nobody questioned whether she belonged. And Admiral Harlan never forgot the lesson that night taught him. The woman he had mocked as a joke had already proven herself in places he could barely remember surviving. The rank he had laughed at was not a decoration. The silence he had mistaken for weakness was discipline. And the tattoo he had recognized too late was a reminder that some heroes do not announce themselves when they enter a room. The most powerful people are not always the loudest. Sometimes they stand quietly while others laugh. Sometimes they let insults pass without explaining who they really are. And sometimes The person being mocked in front of an entire room is the very person who once saved the lives of the people laughing at her. Maya Brooks never needed to shout, brag, or reveal her past to earn respect. Her record had already spoken for her long before anyone in that ballroom knew her name. And as she walked away from the ceremony that day, the small sniper tattoo on her arm remained hidden beneath her sleeve, just as it had for years. But now Admiral Harlan knew what it meant. He knew that behind that ink was a story of sacrifice, courage, and a mission that had saved his life. And from that day forward, whenever someone judged a person by their appearance, their rank, or the silence they carried, Harlan would remember the night he laughed at a woman he thought was insignificant, only to discover that she was the reason he had survived the darkest night of his life. Because sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one with the greatest story. And sometimes the moment someone finally recognizes the truth is the exact moment they realize they were standing in front of a legend all along.